My name is Rachel Reese. You still just like file papers, right? Chase says it with a casual laugh, teeth bright eyes already flicking to his phone like the question was barely worth asking. He doesn't wait for my answer. He never does. And neither does anyone else at this table. My fork pauses midair. Something warm and sour climbs into my throat. I glance around the polished brunch table, linen napkins, scrambled eggs sculpted like art, my mother's perfume clouding the air. My older brother Mark sips his mimosa unfazed. My sister leans in to cut strawberries for her toddler like nothing was said. Even my father retired. Brigadier General Tom Reese doesn't blink. The silence says enough they agree with him. Just papers. My fingers curl slightly unseen beneath the white cloth. I breathe in. I keep my shoulders loose. I imagine just for fun the moment Chase might realize those papers I file include satellite intercepts from hostile state cyber units, AI-driven drone patrol algorithms, and diplomatic war game simulations that shape congressional funding. But here at this table, I'm not director of anything. I'm just Rachel. Actually, I say quietly, offering him a smile. I don't mean I've been a little busier than that lately. But Chase is already mid-story again, boasting about his new role at the private equity firm despite being fired from his last position for misplacing $250,000 in client funds. My sister beams at him. My dad chuckles. I'm invisible again, until my phone vibrates. Once, twice. I ignore it at first, assuming it's one of the usual early morning updates. But the third buzz feels different. I reach into my bag, sliding the device out beneath the tablecloth. Private line. Red channel. Do not miss my stomach flips. Only one contact uses the red channel. I glance at the table, no one's looking. I tap the screen, tilt it slightly. The name that flashes on it does something to the back of my neck. Cold. Electric. Elgin Drake, Joint Chiefs Ops. Chase is still laughing. My sister is telling a story about PTA politics. No one notices my thumb hover, tremble for a breath, then hit decline. Not now. Not here. But the message is clear. They don't know who I am. They don't know what I carry. And maybe it's time they did. I didn't always feel this small. Or this dangerous. But the road to both began right here in rooms like this, where men who never earned anything sat like kings, and women who built legacies were remembered as helpers. Growing up, I learned how to disappear in a military house full of men with brass on their shoulders. My dad raised Mark to be a leader. He raised me to be supportive. You'd make a great aide one day, he told me when I was 10. I thought it was a compliment. I didn't want medals. I just wanted truth, precision, order. So I learned systems, structures, patterns no one else noticed. I taught myself code before I could drive. Got my top secret clearance before my first real relationship. No one in my family knew, of course. They thought I was doing admin for the Pentagon. Even when I worked black files, when my signature started showing up in interagency briefings, they never asked, and I never corrected them. Until that brunch, that phone call. That line I didn't answer. Because at some point you realize silence isn't strength, it's surrender. The thing is, you can only let them write you off so many times before you start writing back. After brunch, I didn't drive home. I went to the garage level of a different building, slipped into the passenger seat of a waiting SUV, and swiped my badge. The man in the driver's seat didn't speak. He didn't need to. We passed through 3 barriers, 2 biometric scans, and an unmarked freight elevator. And that's where I sat, still wearing the same ivory blouse I wore to brunch, still tasting bitter grapefruit on my tongue as the Joint Chiefs laid out the cyber war scenario that had just escalated to DEFCON 3. Apparently, someone had poked the wrong node in a Chinese comm satellite, and someone else had countered. Fast. The room was tense. All eyes were on the packet in my hands, 10 pages, single-spaced print only. I had less than 10 minutes to absorb and advise. And I did, without blinking. When I spoke, generals listened, but my father still thought I took lunch orders for colonels. It's not that I needed them to be proud of me. It's that I wanted to be seen. To be understood not as a girl who liked organization or followed instructions, but as the architect of contingencies, the woman whose hands helped shape decisions that determined national posture. I didn't want applause. I wanted acknowledgement, but acknowledgement never came. Not until that moment in the garage. Not until my silence cracked and I made the choice to stop hiding behind clearance levels and let my name ring louder than their doubts. So when I left that secure room and finally got back into my own car, I didn't drive home. I drove straight to my father's house. And that's where this story truly begins. My father lives in the same colonial brick house I grew up in, perched on a quiet cul-de-sac in Alexandria, with the flag always crisply folded on the porch, the lawn cut to exact regulation height. Even after he retired from the army, the house stayed in parade-ready shape. It was like he feared a general might show up for inspection at any moment. The driveway's empty. Good. I don't want an audience for this. I sit in my car a moment longer, gripping the wheel, watching sunlight bounce off the glass storm door. It still squeaks when you open it, that I remember. I used to sneak back in after curfew through that door, stepping only on the carpeted spots to avoid creaks in the hardwood. Now my badge opens nuclear command centers, and I still hesitate to open my father's front door. I finally ring the bell. He answers in his pressed polo, looking surprised, but not particularly pleased. He always had a way of blinking slowly at unexpected situations like they annoyed him. "Rachel," he says, stepping aside. "Didn't know you were coming. I figured you wouldn't mind," I say, walking past him into the living room. I sit on the edge of the same brown leather couch that he's had since I was in braces. The room smells like Old Spice fresh dusting spray and ancient war books. I look up at the mantel. Still the same lineup, his promotion certificate to Brigadier General Mark's officer commission frame, and an old photo of the two of them at Fort Benning. There's no photo of me up there. There never was. Dad sits across from me, arms folded. "Everything okay? I just came from brunch." He nods slowly. "Your sister said it went well." "Yeah," I say. "It went really well. Chase said I still just file papers." A flicker of a smirk tugs at his mouth. "He's a character. He's a jackass," I say, tone flat. "And you let it slide." Dad leans back. "Rachel, you've always been a little sensitive about titles and all that." "Titles," I blink. "Dad, do you even know what I do?" He opens his mouth, then closes it again, rubs his jaw. "You work at the Pentagon. That's a building I snap, not a job." He bristles. "Don't raise your voice at me." I breathe in slowly. "Fine. Let's keep it calm." Silence stretches between us. A crow caws somewhere outside. I glance again at that mantel and something hardens inside me. "Let me help you," I say, reaching into my bag. I pull out a manila envelope, the kind we use when nothing digital will do. I slide it across the coffee table. "You want to know what I actually do?" "Read that." He stares at it like it's ticking. "What is it?" "It's the unclassified portion of my latest appointment package," I say, keeping my voice even. "As of last week, I've been named Director of Civilian Cyber Strategy for the Department of Defense." He blinks. "You're... what?" "It's a joint appointment with DHS, Interagency Task Force Coordination. I'll be advising on infrastructure defense, digital warfare doctrine, and counter-AI protocols." He exhales. Long. Low. And I can see the machinery behind his eyes trying to catch up. Because in his world, I was always the quiet daughter who helped Mom with dishes, who organized files, who never made waves. "So you're not just..." "In logistics," he finally mutters. "Dad," I say with a faint smile, "I design logistics. For national survival." He picks up the envelope, opens it, slowly scans the first page. I watch his eyes move, his brows rise, and for the first time in 35 years, he doesn't speak. I don't tell my father the rest, about how I started in windowless rooms drafting briefings that others took credit for, how I learned to keep my head down, sharpen my skills, and let men with louder voices get promoted faster, how I watched junior officers mansplain protocols I'd written, how I stayed up nights writing code no one would read until one day someone did. It started with a small breach at the FAA, a missed anomaly in network latency patterns. I caught it, flagged it, routed it to a backchannel node I'd built myself. That one catch stopped what could have grounded the entire eastern seaboard for 2 days. The next week, I was pulled into my first Black Cell meeting. After that, I never looked back. I stopped waiting for credit. I stopped needing applause, and I learned to thrive in the shadows. I became the architect of invisible defenses. But somewhere along the way, I made a mistake. I assumed the people who loved me would one day notice. The truth is, my family doesn't hate me. They just never bothered to see me. And the difference between those two things can feel like being starved in a room full of food you're not allowed to touch. Mark always got the spotlight. Promoted to Major Young, then transferred into a strategic advisory position. I attended his pinning ceremony and cheered louder than anyone. He didn't come to mine. My mother is a soft-spoken Southern woman who believes in gratitude and grace. She still introduces me as Rachel. She's real smart, works for the government, but hush-hush stuff, we don't really understand it. Every time she says it, I feel like a footnote in my own story. As for Chase, he's a mosquito in khakis. All buzz, no sting. He married into this family because he knew the Reese name had weight in certain D.C. circles. I've seen him pretend to be a veteran just to impress investors, but I let it all go. I told myself I didn't need validation until that brunch, until that stupid laugh, until my phone lit up with a call from the Joint Chiefs while I sat there pretending to be the organized one at a brunch full of frauds. That was the moment something snapped, not out of anger, but clarity. You don't need to be seen by people who refuse to open their eyes. You just need to show up for yourself. Back in my apartment that night, I poured a whiskey, opened my laptop, and typed something bold at the top of a new file, reclaiming space. A memoir of invisibility and power. It was time to tell my story. Not to the world. To me. The funny thing about being ignored for so long is that it doesn't always feel like violence. Sometimes it's as soft as a shrug, as quiet as a skipped thank you, as cruel as a laugh at brunch. The Family Legacy Award was announced on a Sunday afternoon in late May. I hadn't been home for dinner in weeks, buried in transition briefings, encrypted drives, late-night security audits, but Mom insisted. "It's just a quick cookout," she said. "Dad has a little something planned for Mark." I'd shown up straight from the office, still in Heel's ID badge tucked inside my purse. The backyard was filled with folding chairs, citronella candles, and rows of red, white, blue streamers flapping on the porch rail. My brother stood front and center with a beer in hand, basking in attention like he was born under stage lights. 30 years of Reese family military excellence, Dad said, raising a glass. And we're proud to recognize Mark with the Reese Honor Medallion created for family members who've exemplified our values of leadership and service. Applause broke out. Photos snapped. Someone handed Mark a plaque. And just like that, it was over. No mention of me. Not one word. Not even a glance in my direction. I stood frozen near the grill, holding a plate of ribs I suddenly couldn't stomach. My hands felt numb. My ears rang faintly like I was underwater. Even my mother didn't look at me, not out of malice, I think, but habit. I'd always been the one behind the scenes. Reliable. Quiet. Out of the frame. "Hey," Rach, Mark said, afterward clapping me on the shoulder like a coach. "You good? You looked a little out of it." "I'm fine," I said, smiling with my teeth. "Congrats." He grinned. "Appreciate that." And just like Chase, just like Dad, just like the rest of them, he didn't notice what he'd done. Or hadn't done. And that somehow hurt worse. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling until 3:00 a.m., my mind looping the same scene on repeat. The backyard, the streamers, the applause, the void of my name in my father's mouth. All of it drilled a slow, steady ache into the center of my chest. In the morning, I opened my secure laptop and reviewed the latest red alert scenario modeling a coordinated phishing infiltration targeting energy grid control servers. It was elegant, sophisticated, terrifying. And I cracked it in under 30 minutes. Within 2 hours, my report was in the hands of 2 cabinet officials. Within 12, I had an encrypted message from the Secretary of Defense personally thanking me for saving what could have been a multi-state blackout. And not one person in my family even knew I went to work that day. I remember being 12, building my own basic firewall on the family desktop, while Mark played Medal of Honor on his PlayStation. I'd asked Dad if he wanted to see it. He said, "Maybe later, kiddo. Don't hog the internet. I remember getting my first clearance badge, how proud I felt, how giddy I was. I told my mother. She said, "That's nice, sweetie. Is that like one of those FBI cards I remember the first time I walked into the skiff without an escort, when a colonel greeted me as ma'am, when I briefed 2-star generals on 0-day vulnerabilities. I'd floated home those nights thinking maybe this time they'll notice, but they never did. Even when I got promoted, even when my name made the Senate Intelligence Subcommittee logs, even when I signed an operations budget that exceeded $320 million. To them, I was still just Rachel, still the one who organized the church fundraiser, still the one who helped set up Mark's engagement slideshow, still the one who could be counted on to grab a few extra forks or make sure the cousins have juice boxes. They were right about one thing: I was invisible, but not in the way they thought. A few days after the medallion ceremony, I tried one more time. It was the kind of attempt you only make when you're desperate not to give up on people you love. I called my mother, asked if she'd be interested in attending a small ceremony in the Capitol complex my team had just been recognized for civilian service excellence. There was a pause. "Oh, honey," she said, "that's so nice. But I think your sister's baby shower is that weekend. Could we maybe see pictures afterward?" I said sure. Then I hung up. Then I cried harder than I had in 5 years. The betrayal wasn't that they didn't love me. It was that they never cared to understand me. Not once. Not even enough to ask. To listen. To sit down and say, "Hey, Rachel, what is it exactly that you do?" I could have told them I oversee policy frameworks designed to prevent AI-deployed misinformation campaigns during wartime. I could have told them I once flagged a fake diplomatic communique before it was routed to an ambassador, averting what would have been a global incident. I could have told them about the night I stood on the roof of a secure ops center watching the Capitol glow under moonlight and felt for once like I belonged somewhere. But they never asked, so I stopped offering. And the worst part, I started to believe them. That I was just someone who filed papers. That maybe I really wasn't special. That maybe the real heroes were the ones who looked the part, broad shoulders, booming voices, medals on their lapels. Not the woman in flats and a messy bun who never made a scene. But something was changing in me. It was slow but certain. Not anger, not even sadness anymore. Something quieter, like when a door in your mind stops creaking and finally clicks shut. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror watching myself fix my collar and said it aloud for the first time, "You don't owe them your truth." And I meant it. I didn't need a medallion. I didn't need applause. But I needed something. Something I hadn't dared imagine in years. Not revenge, not recognition. Just the space to be. To exist fully, loudly, powerfully as myself. And if that space didn't exist in their world, I'd build one of my own. The resignation letter sat on my desktop for 3 days. Subject line, "Re-intent to transition." Effective immediately. Body, after careful reflection, I have decided to step away from my current role as Director of Civilian Cyber Strategy. This decision comes with deep gratitude for the trust and opportunities afforded to me over the last 7 years. I believe it is time to reevaluate the personal cost of service. Respectfully, Rachel Reese. I must have reread that letter 50 times. Each time my fingers hovered over the send button and each time I stopped. But the temptation grew stronger with every hour. Burnout was setting in, deep, creeping, invisible. Not the kind that makes you fall asleep at your desk, the kind that makes your purpose feel pointless, that makes world-shifting briefings feel like white noise. That makes you ask, if the people I love don't even care, then what the hell am I still doing this for? I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus. I'd sit in meetings nodding along while parsing data packets for signs of a Russian 0-day exploit and suddenly forget what year it was. I once mistyped a protocol string in a secure channel, something I'd never done before. My hands trembled as I corrected it. The system pinged back, error resolved. But I wasn't resolved. I was unraveling, and no one saw it. Not my team, not my superiors, not even me until it was too late. The breaking point came on a Monday morning. Rain fell in steady slashes across my windshield. The world felt gray and flat, like someone had drained the saturation from my life. I pulled into the underground lot beneath the department building and sat there, engine off, wipers ticking once then again. I stared at the wall of concrete in front of me and whispered, "I can't do this." Then I broke. No tears, no sobbing, just silence. That terrifying kind of silence where your body gives up your breath, shortens, and your mind goes blank, not from peace, but from collapse. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out the small flash drive I always kept with me. It held every speech I'd written, every contingency I'd authored, every commendation I'd ever received. I stared at it like it was a stranger's memory. All of that, for what? So Chase could laugh at me, so my mother could skip my recognition ceremony, so my brother could hang a plaque next to his medals while I got another folded napkin at brunch. I opened the car door slowly. The rain hit hard, almost cold enough to sting. I walked up the back ramp to the service elevator, swiped my badge, and descended alone. That was the morning I almost quit. I made it to my office, sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and opened the resignation draft again. I added the date. I typed sincerely. My finger hovered over send. Then something stopped me. A flash, a flicker, a memory. I was 22, fresh into my first Pentagon role, one of only 3 women in my division, and the youngest by a decade. I'd stayed late one night revising a threat matrix after a senior analyst had bungled the encryption tags. When I handed in the fixed version, he smiled and said, "Thanks, sweetheart. You're a natural assistant." The words scorched me like acid, but I smiled. And stayed. I stayed through the slights, the mispronounced name in every first meeting, the way no one believed my numbers until a man repeated them, the way my ideas became brilliant only when rephrased by someone with grayer hair. I stayed because I believed it would matter, and it did. No matter what they thought, my family, my colleagues, my critics, I had shaped real policy. I had prevented real threats. I had created systems used by 4 federal agencies. And I still wasn't done. I closed the resignation letter, then I deleted it. Then I opened a blank file and started typing something else entirely, a running list of every single victory they never saw. The intercepted malware deployment in 2019 that prevented the shutdown of 2 U.S. ports. The emergency protocol I authored during the Eastern Grid instability that kept 1.6 million homes powered. The AI ethics brief that led to an internal reform in drone targeting logic saving untold civilian lives overseas. The task force I trained from scratch, now embedded in 5 major agency branches. The girl who used to be dismissed as quiet, now one of 5 women to hold a director-level cyber post in federal defense. By the time I stopped typing, my hands were steady, my coffee was cold, and the storm had passed. Outside my window, the sun cut through the clouds in strips of gold and white. I printed the document, folded it, slid it into my personal file cabinet, not as evidence for anyone else, just for me. Proof that I existed, proof that I mattered even when no one clapped. That night, I went home and stood in front of the mirror again. Same gray suit, same tired eyes, but something in the gaze looking back was different. It wasn't hungry for approval anymore. It was ready to stop asking, ready to stop explaining, ready to act. The people at that brunch had no idea who I was, but the Pentagon did. The White House did. Hell, half of Langley did, and for once in my life, that was enough. But that didn't mean I was letting them off the hook, because the next time someone at that table asked me if I just filed papers, I wouldn't smile. I'd show them the call I was about to take and let them sit in that silence, just like I had every year, every holiday, every time they looked through me. The difference now, I was done being invisible. The call came just before 6 a.m. the following Thursday. Unmarked number. Triple authenticated line. I was still in bed half asleep when the encryption handshake pulsed through my phone. I snapped awake instantly. Only one division uses that level of clearance. Reese, I answered, voice flat heart already accelerating. The voice on the other end belonged to Lieutenant General Drake, Joint Chiefs Cyber Division. Calm clipped and not one for small talk. "Director Reese," he said, using the title without hesitation. "We need you in DCSF. 40900. We're submitting your name for final clearance." POTUS has signed off. We're fast-tracking it. It took me a second to process. Clearance. For what? Then he said the words, Civilian Lead Federal Cyber Resilience and Infrastructure Task Force. This wasn't just a step up. It was historic. No civilian woman, not one outside of active military duty, had ever led a joint cyber resilience task force across DoD, DHS, and FEMA. This wasn't a hallway promotion or a discrete budget increase. This was visible. This was loud. This would put my name on every record, on every interagency memo, on the line for future appropriations hearings. And like a switch flipping in the pit of my stomach, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I didn't call my family. I didn't tell my friends. Instead, I spent the next 48 hours doing something strange. I documented everything. Not for them, for me. I started printing out the artifacts of my life, declassified memos with my signature on them, redacted screenshots of ops chains, thank you notes from senior officials. I laid them out across my living room floor like puzzle pieces. And for the first time ever, I saw myself clearly. Not just as someone who had survived the dismissal and silence, but someone who had reshaped national defense in a time of digital war, quietly, relentlessly. There was power in proof, and healing in acknowledgement, even if the only eyes that ever saw it were mine. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted one more thing, not revenge, not recognition, a reckoning. I didn't want them to clap for me. I didn't even want them to apologize. I wanted them to sit there, same table, same smug posture, and realize they'd been talking down to someone they couldn't even comprehend. So, when my mother texted me about the upcoming quarterly family brunch, I simply wrote back, I'll be there. Then I called Angela, my closest contact inside the press-safe corridor of public affairs, and asked her one question. Can I schedule my first on-record availability as director? For this Saturday morning, Angela laughed. That's kind of short notice. I know. Who's the audience? Just one table, I said. She paused. Then she said, I'll make it happen. The morning of the brunch, I dressed carefully. Not in combat boots or a power suit. No. I wore a soft slate blue wrap dress, minimal makeup, pearl earrings. I wanted to look exactly like the woman they thought they knew, unthreatening, tasteful, unremarkable. I wanted them to see me first so they could fully feel the whiplash of the truth that followed. I arrived 5 minutes late. Not too late to be rude, just late enough to be noticed. Rachel, my mother, said, standing to hug me, You look lovely. We already ordered mimosas. My father nodded, barely glancing up from his menu. Mark grinned. So how's the paper-pushing world? And just like that, the blood returned to my ears. Same script, same stage. Except this time I had the mic. My phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up. Angela's name flashed on the screen. I answered it calmly, placing the phone to my ear, not breaking eye contact with my brother. Good morning, Angela, I said clearly. Yes, this is Director Reese. There was a pause at the table. Forks stopped moving. Chase blinked. My mother furrowed her brow. Mark leaned forward like maybe he hadn't heard me correctly. No, I'm stepping away for just an hour. I'll be back on base by 2. Go ahead and coordinate with FEMA's policy desk and tell Langley they can expect the draft language in the next drop. Dead silence now. I could feel their confusion bending the air between us like static. Then I ended the call, placed the phone gently beside my water glass, and looked up. The whole table stared at me. Chase's mouth opened, then closed again. My father looked stunned. For the first time in my life, I saw doubt in his eyes, not about me, but about every assumption he'd ever made. Director? He finally asked, voice low. I nodded, reaching for my napkin. Yes, I said. As of Thursday, I'm serving as director of the Federal Cyber Resilience Task Force, multi-agency integration under presidential directive. It's still paperwork technically, but now it's the kind that decides which cities stay on the grid. Silence. Total, perfect silence. Then, my mother, sweet polite, always the bridge, tried to recover. Well, that's just incredible, honey. Why didn't you say anything? I folded the napkin in my lap slowly. Smiled. I figured you were busy, I said. Then I took a sip of my water. They didn't argue. They didn't congratulate me either, but they didn't laugh. Not this time. This time they listened. This time the weight shifted. This time I was the unknown quantity at the table and they couldn't look away. The brunch didn't end with applause. It didn't end with hugs or toasts or proud declarations from my father. It ended in the quietest, most satisfying way imaginable, a room full of people realizing they'd missed something enormous, and there was no rewinding time. I stayed exactly 13 minutes after the phone call. Just enough time to finish my eggs, thank the waiter, and answer two stunned, fumbling questions. Mark had leaned in, still blinking like he was trying to solve a math problem mid-conversation. So, what does that actually mean? I tilted my head. It means I'm responsible for coordinating the protection of every critical infrastructure node in the country, from municipal water grids to military command networks. If it connects, I secure it. He gave a stiff laugh. Wow, that's more than filing papers. I gave him the same smile he once gave me when I asked what his rank meant. The condescending one. The dismissive one. Yeah, just a bit. Then Chase jumped in, of course. Always late to the moment, always desperate to recenter himself. Well, I mean, that's amazing. You should have told us we didn't know that word again. Didn't. As if it excused them. As if years of shrugging me off could be wiped clean by pretending they'd just lacked the right information. No, I said gently, placing my napkin on my plate. You didn't ask. And with that, I stood. My mother blinked up at me clearly, unsure whether to reach out or stay seated. She stayed seated. I looked at each of them just once. Then I walked out. No dramatic speeches, no monologues, no fire. I left them in their silence, the same silence they left me in for years. I stepped into the sunlight, a warm breeze brushing against my collarbones, and exhaled in a way I hadn't in months. Not because I'd won anything, but because I was done performing. I used to think power was about being recognized, elevated, praised. Now I understood power is walking away from people who once defined your limits without taking their definitions with you. But the confrontation wasn't over. The real reckoning wasn't with them. It was with me. Because even after that brunch, I still found myself glancing at my phone, waiting for a text. Something. A message from my dad saying he was proud. A photo of the family plaque this time with a second name carved in beneath Mark's. A quiet apology from my mother in the form of a forwarded article about my work. But none of that came. Not that day. Not the next. Not ever. And that was its own kind of lesson. That week, I returned to my new office in the Eisenhower building. My badge now triggered different lights, different doors. The walls were thicker, the faces older, the stakes higher. I was briefed on a looming cyber espionage escalation scenario between two nuclear-adjacent states. My signature would be on the protocol that defined how and when American response would trigger. In one meeting, a deputy from Homeland Security asked Director Reese, would you prefer a classified isolation clause embedded in the pre-authorization, or should that stay external? I answered without hesitation. My voice didn't shake. No one interrupted me. No one assumed I was someone's assistant. They called me Director Reese, and they meant it. But at night, I still walked my apartment barefoot, the city lights flickering across the glass, wondering if it would ever feel like enough. If healing was a place you arrived or just a path you walked, knowing certain rooms in your life would always echo when empty. That's when I did something strange, something terrifying. I invited my parents to my change of office acknowledgement ceremony. It wasn't public, just a quiet internal event. No cameras, a few high-level agency leaders, standard DoD protocol. They didn't respond for 3 days. Then, finally, my mother texted, "We'll be there. Your father said we shouldn't miss it." My hands shook when I read it. Not from fear, from the weight of what I knew it would mean if they showed up and still didn't see me. They did show up. My father in a dark blazer, medals on his lapel. My mother in pearls holding the program like it was foreign currency. They sat in the second row. They watched as the assistant secretary thanked me for my years of work. They heard my name listed alongside past legends in civilian strategy. And still, they didn't clap, not until others did first. I stood behind the podium, heart thudding, and delivered my short speech. No tears, no tremble. Just truth. I didn't speak about family. I didn't seek their eyes in the crowd. I spoke about the mission, about the invisible threads of defense most Americans never think about the analysts and officers who work 12-hour shifts to keep the lights on the water, clean the skies, safe. I ended with one line unscripted. My work has always been about what you don't see, but sometimes we forget what's invisible still holds the weight of the world. Afterward, my mother approached me, took both my hands. Her eyes were glassy. "You looked beautiful up there," she said. "So strong." I nodded. "Thank you." She opened her mouth again, hesitated, then closed it. I looked past her at my father, still standing stiffly, arms behind his back, scanning the room like a man searching for something he'd misplaced. He didn't speak to me. Not that day. Not in the parking lot. Not in the days that followed. But he did leave something behind. At my desk the next morning, I found a small envelope. No name, no markings. Inside was a folded slip of paper. "Rachel, I didn't know how much I didn't know. I still don't. But I see it now. All of it. You earned it. Every step. Dad. No love, no signature. But I didn't need it. That was more than I ever expected. And maybe that was enough. It's been 4 months since that brunch. 3 since the promotion. 2 since I got the note from my father. And 1 since I finally let go of needing any more from any of them. It happened in the simplest way. I was sitting alone at home on a Sunday, the kind of crisp, breezy afternoon where the city hums quietly but doesn't intrude. The windows were open. I was drinking tea. There were no alerts, no calls, no encrypted folders waiting on my laptop. I'd just gotten off a weekly debrief with the Department of Energy. My task force had implemented a new network shunt that would reduce rural grid vulnerabilities by 62%. One of our models had been adopted as the new national standard for cyber infrastructure resilience. In any other season of my life, I'd have wanted to call someone. To say, "Look what we did." To ask, "Are you proud?" But I didn't feel that ache anymore. I just closed the laptop, leaned back, and exhaled, peacefully. I didn't need applause. I didn't need them to get it. Because I got it. And that was enough. The truth is, I used to think life was about being seen. About proving yourself. About climbing every ladder placed in front of you just so someone at the top could finally say, "You belong." But ladders built on other people's approval never end. You just keep climbing higher, lonelier, until the air thins and no one's clapping anymore. What I've learned? Build your own staircase. Even if no one sees it. Even if you climb it alone. Especially then. A few weeks ago, I saw Chase again. It was my niece's birthday party. Balloons, juice boxes, a moon bounce that somehow held 6 screaming children and a golden retriever. He wandered over while I was helping slice cake, beer in hand, slightly sweaty in his button-down. "Hey," he said, almost sheepishly. "I read about that task force thing. That's insane." "Yeah," I said, lightly, passing a slice to a child in sparkly shoes. "It's been busy." "No kidding," he said. "Like, you're actually in charge." I looked at him, really looked. For the first time, I didn't feel smaller in his presence. I didn't feel the need to impress. I didn't even feel insulted. I just saw him for what he was, a man who'd never looked past the surface of anything, not work, not people, not family. "I am," I said, turning back to the cake. He opened his mouth again, maybe to say something clever or apologetic, but I'd already moved on. As for my father, we've spoken a few times since the ceremony. They're short calls. He asks about the weather in D.C., mentions things from the news. Sometimes he forwards military op-eds, the kind he used to print and tape to the fridge. But last week he sent something different. No subject line, no preface. Just a scanned copy of my official appointment notice. He'd printed it, framed it, and hung it in his office right next to Mark's commission. It's not a parade. It's not a speech. But for a man like him, it's a confession. And for a woman like me, it's closure. People ask me now if I ever wish I'd taken a different path, left government-chased money-written books instead of white papers. But the truth is, I love what I do. Not because it's glamorous, not because it earns me front-page headlines, but because when I walk into that cold room each morning, flip open a file that could rewrite the power grid or intercept a threat we'll never speak of publicly, I know I'm right where I'm meant to be. There is something sacred about unseen work, something heroic in the hidden, and if no one claps, I'll still show up. Sometimes I keep that old resignation letter in a folder titled Ghost Files. I open it on bad days when the politics drag or the meetings stretch too long, or I feel the familiar echo of invisibility pressing at the edges of my skull. I read it once, then I delete it again, and again, and again. Like a ritual, like a reminder, like proof of how far I've come. A journalist recently asked me what advice I'd give to young women entering government service. I told her this: be quiet if that's who you are, but never let them confuse quiet with weak. Learn the game, then design a better one. And when they don't see you build a room so powerful they can't get in without your permission. She called it poetic. I call it survival. My name is Rachel Reese. I'm 35. I don't file papers anymore. I file strategy, protocol, policy, and sometimes history, not for their recognition, not for revenge, but because every girl who's ever been underestimated deserves to see what it looks like when you rise anyway. And because sometimes the sweetest victory doesn't come from being celebrated, it comes from walking into the next room without needing to be.